Hi friends and family, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and I think you're going to love today's video. Yesterday I kind of did a part one whereby I showcased the cards from the Pattern Garden, hot off the presses by Ian Cumpstey. It's a Mamluk deck. Somebody had recently asked me about Mamluk decks after they watched a video that I had created when this deck first came out. This was the Mamluk deck, Trzes, T-R-Z-E-S, Mamluk deck. And this came out in 2018. Now, interestingly, a cool little story. I had been aching to have a Mamluk deck because I understood that the early Italians and then, of course, TDM decks were somewhat based on the cards, the playing cards from the Mamluk deck from, the Middle East. They had, the TDM in particular had like scimitars, and they didn't have polo sticks, but they had batons, which was what the European equivalent of what they understood the polo stick to be, and coins and cups. So they apparently got their suit cards from the earlier playing cards out of the Middle East. And I really I yearned to have a copy. And I had even gone to Morocco and the southern part of Spain and Granada, and in search of what I could find from Mamluk. I hadn't gone to the Middle East, but that was the closest I've ever been to the Middle East. And I was like, even when I was there, I was looking for Mamluk, playing cards, and I couldn't find any. So I had put it out to the universe. Please, dear universe, please have this deck find me somehow. And I swear to goodness, within 2 days, I saw a Kickstarter for the Mamluk Kickstarter. And I ordered it, and I campaigned heavily for other people to get in on it, because the more people who got in on it, the more likely it would have been to be, printed. So I got this beautiful deck, and I'm so grateful for it. And I have a few videos of it already. If you go looking for it, you'll find them. So when somebody was watching that video recently and they said, where can I get a deck like this? I was like, well, I don't think you can get this deck, because this deck I'm sure is out of print. I don't think it's available anymore. But I had, just the way the universe works, a day or two before realized, or came to my attention, that Ian Cumpstey was creating a Mamluk deck. So I sent that person, I said, hey, look, go check out Ian Cumpstey over at Scatty Press. I think they're doing one. Now, I'm not sure if Ian is with Scatty Press anymore, because the box says www.northerndisplayers.co.uk. So I'm not really sure if he's with Scatty, has that name, Scatty Press, anymore. So I just wanted to mention that. But I told my subscriber that, there is a Mamluk that's available. Now, I thought about it for a couple of days myself and thought, maybe I should get it too. But when I looked it up, I saw that the Kickstarter had ended, and I contacted Ian and I said, is it too late to get my hands on one of these decks? And he said, no. And he let me in on it as though I was getting in on the Kickstarter, even though it had ended. He was gracious enough to let me in on it. So now I have 2 copies of a Mamluk deck, and I figured what a great idea to do a side-by-side comparison. For those of you who already have the Trzes and you want to get a second one, you can see how they compare. And for those of you who don't have either, you can see how they compare. Okay, so let me flip the camera and we'll get started. Now, the one thing that you'll readily recognize as soon as you see the 2 compared is that the Trzes Mamluk is considerably larger, perhaps in the original tradition of the size and the proportion of the cards, whereas the Ian Cumpstey is more in keeping with modern day playing cards. Now, I've often wondered, if you recognize the Bolognese size cards, you'll remember that any decks that came out of Bologna or the Bolognese, influence were elongated. And so I wonder, just how much influence when the Bolognese were creating their decks, how much they were thinking of the proportion of the Mamluk decks. Okay, so now there isn't a whole, the deck from Ian Cumpstey didn't come with too much information. It came with a kind of cheat sheet card, which is very helpful, and it explains a few things so that you can readily identify the cards. And then the other deck, the Trzes, came with a roadmap so that you can readily see what you're looking at, because the cards are a little different than what we're all accustomed to in the Western world, for those of us who are in the Western world. And so the cheat sheet is kind of helpful so we know what we're looking at. So here we have the Ace of Scimitars. Now, I know that this deck, because it came with information, was based on existing cards that already existed. But there were, I think, 15 missing. And so the artist of this deck recreated cards in the fashion. And I presume that Ian Cumpstey did something similarly. Or with whatever cards existed, he just created his own version. Here are the backs. So this is the suit of scimitars or swords. So you see, Ian, what he did was put the odd man. It's more of what we're accustomed to seeing with three swords, right? With one being a straight edge. Whereas the Mamluk, probably they all would have been in the style of a scimitar around it. Oh no, I stand corrected. Here we now I'll get to it. You see the beautiful floral motif. Now, see, this is in keeping with what we have here from Ian. So there goes that theory that I just mentioned. So the fifth one is a straight one as well in the Mamluk by Trzes. How beautiful. Aren't these just, both decks, aren't they exquisite? Now, Ian Cumpstey's deck, I believe, is 52 cards. So if you wanted to play it like a regular deck of playing cards, you could. All you'd have to do is familiarize yourself with what you're looking at, which isn't too hard. You can glance to see that this is 4 and 4, so that would be 8 of swords, right? The odd suit for swords has the single straight blade. Look at that. Aren't they both just exquisite? So both of these decks are very similar, but they're not identical. Just like any two tarot decks are very similar, but they're not identical as well. Now, in this original deck that I had, there were, I think, 3 or 4, quite a few extra sword cards. Now that was where I think the pips ended. And then this is where Hold on a second. I think I got a little confused myself. Now, one thing I appreciate with the Ian Cumpstey deck is that the deck was simplified to a large degree, so that after you have your pips to 10, then you have your court cards, and he's included only 3, which I think some of the Mamluk decks had 3 or 4 court cards. Now, all the court cards of either deck can't have human representations because that would have been against the faith of the people who created these decks originally. So the court cards are identified with a blue heading with the name identifying who they are. So in the Ian Cumpstey, we have the 1 scimitar, which is similar to the ace, except that we have a blue heading. So if it's got a blue heading, you know it's a court card. So for the 2, the second deputy, we have 2 and then the blue. And then for the head honcho or the king or the highest ranking individual, we have a singular 1 on top of a throne and then the blue that identifies. Now we have a few additional cards for the suit of scimitar by Trzes, because there were other cards of the higher order that were found from different decks. So here we have, let's see, what do we have here? I'm trying to find it. Okay, so here we have type 1. So I suppose that the Mamluk cards, there were like type 1 and type 2 and type 3, just like we have TDM1 and TDM2. So this would have been the first deputy of scimitars of type 1. Here we have the second deputy of scimitars, type 1 as well. And then the third deputy of scimitars, which was recreated because there wasn't an original of type 1. And then the king, so this deck, particular deck, is based on 4 court cards. So this one would have been the king of type 1, and you see he's got a throne and the blue banner. But then he gave us an additional 2 cards, which were, one was from type 2. So this would have been not a, it says 9 of scimitars, but it has the blue up top. So it kind of looks like it's some kind of a deputy or something, but it's got the blue heading. So I'm a little confused. And then this one, which is gorgeous, is also got the blue heading on top, but it's described as type 310 of scimitars. So I'm not quite sure why those extra pip cards had blue headings. Okay, so here we go into the cups. So we have the Ace of Cups of each. And as I mentioned, I have an unveiling of both of these decks by themselves. If I can find this one, I'll post it. I may just have to do another one because God only knows where it is. I have almost 400 videos, and they're even hard for me to find things in my collection of videos. This one I just did yesterday, the unveiling of the Ian Cumpstey one. So I will definitely show that unveiling by itself. I'll include that link down below. Now see here, we have like an archway. And here we have a different kind of pattern that borders the 2 cups. But we have a similar stacking. It takes a little bit of getting used to because they are, a little different to my eye than, what I'm accustomed to seeing. Even though there is some similarity to tarot decks, they're still different enough that I needed the cheat sheet to know what I was looking at originally. And here is the 10th pip for the Suit of Cups. Now remember, Ian only has 3 court cards for the deck because it's more in keeping with what we're accustomed to. I'm not sure if that's why he did it. There were Mamluk decks that only had 3 court cards and some that had 4. And so we have the ace, oh, excuse me, not the ace, the first deputy, type 1. Here is the second deputy. Ooh, excuse me, so sorry. And this is type 1. And then here we have the third deputy, or the king. Oh no, here's the third deputy. Here we have the king, because remember, the highest ranking card will have the suit sitting on a throne and with the blue title. But this deck has 4, and so we have a difference here, so that here we actually have 3 with that to show that he's the third deputy. And I believe this card is recreated. I don't think there was an original for this deck creator to copy. And then another version of type 1, the King of Multitudes. So this was the equivalent of this one. Okay, so now we're moving into the polo sticks. Now remember, the Europeans did not understand what polo sticks were, and so something either got lost in creation and they just made it batons, or they just decided they didn't know what these things were, so they just made something that they knew that was similar. So here we have the ace of batons, or excuse me, the ace of polo sticks. So either deck, or just scrumptious. You'll notice that the third polo stick is curved. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, because initially I was thinking, it was a sword, but it's not, because obviously these are not swords. And you see the interlacing here, and you wonder if that's where the idea came from, interlacing swords or batons in TDM decks. So I consider myself quite fortunate to be able to have 2 Mamluk decks. Here we have the 7. This one's a little big to even put in the screen. 9 and 10. So you see that the additional cards are curved rather than the same as the original 8 polo sticks, right? Which is kind of interesting. Okay, so here we have a similarity with, I think, First Deputy. So we have a single baton with the heading that identifies who it is. I dropped my cheat sheet. Give me a second to pick it up. I just want to make sure I'm saying it right. Okay, this one is the second deputy, as is this. And we can recognize it because it's got 2 polo sticks and the title. And here, it's a little less easy to see. This one's based on type 1 style. And this is the 3rd deputy, whereas this is the highest ranking of Ian's deck. The highest ranking, again, has the singular item on a throne with the blue heading. But this one has the 4 courts, and so we have the 3rd deputy. And then here we have the head honcho. And then we have a few additional cards. Each of these were type 2. This one was the 1st deputy, and this was the ace of polo sticks type 2. Okay, so we're moving along, and here we have the ace of coin. And obviously, I hope I mentioned it earlier, you know, our card suits, you know, the European card suits were based on the Mamluk card suits as much as they recognized the coins, the swords, and the cups. And then, as I mentioned, the polo sticks became batons. Okay, so here we have the ace. Oh, boy, aren't they both so beautiful? Now you see, there are differences in the distribution. So I don't know. I think this one's based more on an existing deck, but I don't have the information from Ian, so I don't know if it was based on a existing Mamluk deck or if he, you know, recreated a deck in the spirit of Mamluk. Here we have the 5 distributed in a way our eyes readily recognize it in the way we do, you know, 5 diamonds, for example. So they have different configurations. Now this one seems more in keeping with what, well, it's hard to say. No, because I think TDM usually has 3 and 3, so it's more like a pathway, right? This one is more similar to one another. 7, 8, The cardstock on both are very similar. They're both very similar. So we have 9 and 10. And now we know we have a court card because we have the blue on top with the singular item. So as I mentioned, you take care not to see this as an ace, because if it's got the blue on top, it's identifying it as a first deputy. Here would be the second deputy. Oh. And then Ian Cumpstey's ends with the king, which has the blue, the singular on top of a throne. And then the other deck that I have, type 1, shows a third deputy. Type 1. A type 1 king of coins, so this would be the head honcho. The equivalent of this one. And then we have an extra type 2. So it was from a different deck, a type 2 style. And this is the third deputy of coins. So here are the 2 Mamluk decks that I have. And you can definitely get in on Ian Cumpstey's. And I'll put the link for it down below. And then this one was, I don't know, I don't think this one's available anymore. But you can't go wrong with either. They're both gorgeous. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, friends, peace, stay well, and please be kind.